You as excited as I am?
Probably more excited.
Probably more. Perfect.
You keep them busy and nobody else will have to worry about it.
I should just charge a fee for that. I keep Murphy busy.
Well, if I had that answer, I'd be sitting in Maui right now doing this podcast on the beach.
30 doors and we walk away,
Yeah.
average 8 to 12 minutes.
So it's not just the process time if everything went perfectly. It's the process time that it's actually taking you to make that.
Hello, everybody. This is Brad Cairns coming at you from the shop floor. And today, finally, Lynn is back from saving the world from all of their shop problems. And she's here in the studio with me. Welcome, Lynn. Lynn, say hi.
Hi, Lynn.
That works. All right. So today we have a very exciting episode for everybody. We are going to talk about what's getting in the way of their throughput goals and why that is so important. Are you as excited as I am?
Probably more excited.
Probably more. Perfect.
I'll start showing that excitement soon.
Any second now. All right. So let's not haste makes waste. Let's dive right in. Tell us what throughput is.
Well, basically, it's what gets across the finish line every day. So in a cabinet shop, it's what's ready to ship. Actually, in any shop, it's what's ready to ship or been shipped out the door.
Okay, cool. So basically, yeah, once it crosses the finish line, it is game on. And why that is so important, obviously, should be obvious. I think a lot of people in the woodworking industry don't see it, but I mean, throughput is you're making your money. You know, if it doesn't cross the finish line, counting as throughput, no money, no funny.
It's cash tied up in your shop.
Perfect. All right. So once we start to delve into calculating our throughput or talking about throughput, there's a couple of times, 3 in particular, that become very, very critical. So we want to just tell you a little bit about each one of those times, and then we'll just keep rocking. So the first time that you need to understand is tack time. This is so important, but almost nobody does anything about it. You're nodding your head. No one does anything about it because it takes a little bit of math and it's kind of hard to calculate. But by definition, tack time is the rate of customer demand. And the reason we are talking about this today is people get that confused with one of the other times, which Lynn will tell you about. But knowing what's coming into your factory at what pace is the actual tack time. So don't get that confused. We hear it misused all the time. So the rate of customer demand. And what's next?
So then we have process time or process time for you, those of you in the US. And that includes, so basically that's any process that you're doing, whether it's, at the CNC or you're making a door or you're making a drawer, or you're putting a cabinet together. It's that time it takes for that process. But it's also including all of that waste, right? So it's not just the process time if everything went perfectly. It's the process time that it's actually taking you to make that.
Yes, product. And that's so key because all too often we run out into the shops and we're timing things, and it's like, yeah, obviously when I'm standing there with my stopwatch, I'm going to do a really good job. I'm not looking for my tools or going to the bathroom, but that process time includes the whole shebang.
Lots of fluctuation.
Lots. Cool.
And I'd be surprised if you know what it is. What your ideal process time is anyways.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. We experience a little bit of that in the sanding world, where we ask people how long it takes them to sand a door, and everyone across the board says 2 minutes. And then we'll stand there and time them, say, oh, 2 minutes, great, please show me. And we'll time them, and it will be 4 to 6 minutes. And I'll be like, oh, I guess I was wrong by a bit. And I say, oh, we're not done yet. We give them 30 doors and we walk away, average 8 to 12 minutes.
Right. Well, there's interruptions, there's quality issues, there's lots of things that are affecting that process time.
Yeah. So, and the last one, which is the one our customers are most interested in, is our lead times. So the lead times is from the time you get the order from the customer until the time the customer has that item. that lead time can be affected by a few things inadvertently, but by our own doing, which would be things like batch size, which would be things like your work in process. So the bigger the batch size, the more work in process. And then, of course, the bigger your lead time, the longer your lead time.
Yeah, they're directly related, right? So, but I'd also like to make a point that we typically have two factories, right? We have a hidden factory with a lead time and a batch size, and then we have a shop floor factory with a lead time and a batch size. So that shop floor is always going to slow down to the rate that it's being fed from that hidden factory. So if your hidden factory's lead times are long, you're also robbing your shop of lead time to actually make the product.
And just for clarity, is a hidden factory is everything that happens from the customer order until the
cut list.
shop cut list.
Usually it's the only product that they're making a cut list basically. And then they're hands off, they've handed it off to the other factory. And then the other factory now hopefully has the correct amount of lead time to make it and they're not rushing. But I just wanted to draw that distinction that we typically don't think we have two factories and we have lead times and batch sizes in both of them.
Okay. And the other thing about lead time is that's the one time that's going to give. That's your accordion. So if you get really busy, you only really have two options. You either tell some customers, no, I can't do that, or you bring the order in and your lead time gets extended.
And you rush.
And then that might be another whole podcast about this train wreck that happens when you start rushing. But here's a point, and we learned this at my factory the hard way, was when you start getting busy, you may have customers that are your like premier customers, your anchor customers, and then all these other random orders start coming in, and you extend your anchor customers' lead time. And this is so bad. And we did it once and we won't do it again. But, we realized, oh boy, we needed to do more math when it came to lead time, in that we reserve a certain percentage of our production for those companies now. And then if something's going to affect their lead time, we either just say no, or we tell that one customer, I'm sorry, you're way out because we can't affect these other ones. And I think all too often, maybe we didn't do it, but other people may benefit from knowing like, hey, protect the ones that love you the most.
Yeah, your consistent customers that pay you on time. Okay, so we were talking about throughput. What could be the reason that you're not meeting your throughput goals? And I would say one reason would be that maybe you don't have a throughput goal. I've seen that a lot. We find out in March that February was a bad month from accounting, and we're all surprised. And now we're trying to reach back in our memory and try and figure out what happened. Inevitably, we don't come up with the real reasons and rinse and repeat. So that would be one reason why you're not meeting your goal,
one.
Because you don't have one. And if you don't have a daily goal or an hourly goal, you really can't get back on the rails again if you find a problem. But at least I know that there's a problem. So if I can tell hourly or daily, I know I have a problem. I can do something to make tomorrow different. I can understand the problem as it's happening while it's fresh in people's minds. And maybe I can even see it, which is great. And we can do real root cause and prevent it from happening again. So
let's say I do have a target. What stops me from hitting it?
Well, we have a bottleneck somewhere. Right? How many bottlenecks do we have? That's a great question, but I'm going to guess there's one.
You're 100% right, and that's something that a lot of people experience, this wandering bottleneck phenomenon. Like one day, oh, it's in the paint shop. One day, oh, it's in my raw materials area. One day, it's in my processing area. Like there's no way I only have one bottleneck. But let me assure you, Lynn's not crazy. There is only one. There's only one bottleneck in your factory, and the wandering bottleneck is a symptom of most likely you're causing the wandering bottleneck with labor misallocation. So fundamentally, first and foremost, you just have to believe that, yes, there's only one bottleneck.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that my favorite saying when people ask me this is bottlenecks. But the bottleneck is where you want to focus, and what else is there, right? It's that important. The bottleneck is directly controlling what is going out across the finish line today and every day. So that's where we want to focus. Everything else is sure. We need to keep the shop running. That's what's dictating what gets across your finish line today.
Right. And if you don't know where that is, because you think it's wandering, how dangerous of a position is that?
Well, you're the drowning man at that point.
Right. And we yeah, not supposed to rescue those.
You throw them a lifeline, you don't get too close.
That's right. So when it comes to bottlenecks, we're gonna dig into our TOC tool bag for this, and we know thanks to Goldratt, there's 5 focusing steps. So the 5 focusing steps are: first, find your bottleneck. Then you look like you want to say something.
Yep, never mind. Keep going.
Hang in there.
You got it.
So we're going to find our bottleneck. We want to elevate the bottleneck.
Exploit the bottleneck.
We want to exploit the bottleneck. Then we want to subordinate all activity to the bottleneck. Then we want to elevate the bottleneck. And then we don't want inertia to get in the way. So we want to make sure we repeat that going back up to step 1, and that cycle just repeats. So the step 1 is find the bottleneck. So how do we find that bottleneck? Because in everybody's factory, one, if you think it's wandering, or it is, you got a problem. You have to nail that down and find that bottleneck. And the easiest way that I found to find the bottleneck is look for the pile. There's going to be a pile somewhere in that factory, and the bottleneck is right after it. That would be number 1. And I've only been in one scenario where we're in a factory and, oh my God, 2 weeks, couldn't find the bottleneck, like looking, and every process was ticking along at the same time. And I was like banging my head on the wall, and by fluke, I'm in the office, and the guy who's doing the data entry opens a drawer, and there had to be a stack of paper 2 feet tall in that drawer. And I'm like, what is that? He says, oh, that's the orders waiting to go out to the shop. I'm like, pardon? What? Waiting to go out to the shop. So immediately in that instance, I knew the first step in the process was the bottleneck, because it wasn't apparent out on the shop floor, which means every other process could keep up with the first process. And that one turned out to be a saw, and bingo, once we knew what it was, we were off to the races.
Right. And that corroborates my statement of the shop slows down to the pace it's being fed at. I mean, a lot of people are always yelling, we need to make that shop go faster. Are we feeding them consistently at the rate that they should be fed? Are we ever slowing down? Because they will slow down. They have no choice.
All right. So let's go on to step 2.
Step 2 is exploit the bottleneck. So how do we do that? We can look at all of the processes in the bottleneck and make process improvements. We're going to find the waste in that process and reduce the waste. We're going to do everything we can to reduce the cycle time of that. It could be a machine, it could be a manual process, but we're going to, process improvements and cycle time on a machine. We want to reduce that. We want to reduce and eliminate downtime. If it's a machine, we definitely want to reduce and eliminate downtime. If it's people doing some sort of manual assembly, we don't want them starved for components ever. We want to treat that like the most important work cell in the facility, right? They're always being fed components, never waiting, no downtime, and their changeovers. We want to focus on their changeovers like it's an Olympic sport. We want to reduce the time of the changeovers. There's a tremendous amount of waste there, and people just take it for granted that this is what we have to do. But we want to focus on there's a tremendous amount of waste in there, and it couldn't be more valuable. A reduction
at the bottleneck.
A reduction at the bottleneck is an immediate translation to a throughput gain. Like you couldn't focus anywhere that's more important.
Right. And so when we're exploiting the bottleneck, that means we're kind of taking that lemon and we're just squeezing it for everything it's worth. we're not yet at the phase of where we would, go buy a piece of equipment or anything like that. That's coming. We'll talk about that, but we're talking about exploiting the bottleneck. What can I do today, right now, for free?
Immediately.
Yeah.
I'll go back to what's more important. What's more important than exploiting that bottleneck? Because it's an immediate throughput gain from that day forward.
Right. So then step 3, we want to rope the rest of the factory into the equation. And now we want to start subordinating everything to the bottleneck. This is a complicated statement, but basically, if our bottleneck is producing, 10 units of something a day, there's no gain in having any other station producing 20, 30, 40. They do want to produce a little bit more than the bottleneck for protective capacity, so maybe 10%. But now we want to, so if we have 10 people in a following process from the bottleneck, and they're just going super fast and they're always running out of work, we actually want to slow that down. If they're producing 20 units, we want to slow that down to be in that 10, 12 range. Same with feeding operations to the bottleneck. You want to just take a look at what each station is doing, getting into their process times and making sure that process time is in line with the time on the bottleneck, or else you're just going to have people standing around the factory at all stations. But they won't look like they're standing around. They'll look busy, very busy.
Well, there's no point in filling up your shop with more work in process if it doesn't help you get more throughput today. It's just, now it's in the way. It's actually working against you, right? And a common misunderstanding that we find all the time is that, when it comes to lean, we don't want to carry any inventory, and that's not true. We want to be very clear about what inventory we're carrying, where and why. Very calculated about it, because it's tying up cash, obviously, and space. And, there's lots of room. There's waste involved. Absolutely. Overproduction, right? That's the mother of all waste. However, from a theory of constraints standpoint, we definitely want to protect our bottleneck, which is, I think, what you were just referring to, having enough inventory in front of the bottleneck.
Yeah. And
in case Murphy shows up, which he will.
Which he will. Almost, maybe not in anyone else's factory. I think he just follows me around. Okay.
You keep him busy, and nobody else will have to worry about it.
I should just charge a fee for that. I keep Murphy busy.
Yeah, you pay him to show up there, and everybody else should be fine.
I bet everybody feels the exact same way, though.
Okay, so now that you've subordinated all of your other activities to the bottleneck, now we're going to elevate the bottleneck, which some people call breaking the bottleneck. So how we do that is we either look at more labor, or we might put some technology or automation in there so that we can, obviously reduce our process time for the bottleneck. But when we break a bottleneck, it's going to move. So my question is it where we want it to be already? And do we want to move it? And if we're going to move it, what's our target? Where should we be moving it to?
Yes. And I think a lot of companies aren't thinking about where is it? Where do we want it? And how do we get it there? Because you definitely want your bottleneck to turn to actually even changing the verbiage from bottleneck to control point. Because bottleneck has a kind of a negative connotation, and you always want to get rid of it. But a control point is something we're controlling like on purpose, and we know it's predictable. We know it's going to be happening every day. When you start to elevate a bottleneck, will it move? So to your point, first statement I would make is, if it's not where we want it, where's it going to move to? And is that where we want it? Because that would be cool. Or maybe it's not where we want it yet, but we can elevate that one as our next project. And will it move to where we want it to go?
Well, how did we decide where we wanted it to go?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm getting patience. Building suspense with our audience.
It's not working with me.
So now we lead into the next question is, what if you are, say, an advanced TOC manufacturer or lean manufacturer, and we've got our control point established, but you want more. So now we start elevating that constraint. We start elevating our bottleneck, and it's going to move. Well, we don't want that. We want it to stay put. So we actually have to pump the brakes on that process improvement. Then we have to go systematically through the entire system and find which other process is, if I elevate this from 10 pieces to 15 pieces, who in the system can't do 15 pieces? Pump the brakes on the control point, go fix that one, whatever capacity constraint you have down the line, fix that one first. So he has excess capacity of 15, then go back to your bottleneck or control point and raise that one. Then now you don't have a fear of your bottleneck running all over your factory and having your people going crazy chasing.
So I think the main message there is don't chase bottlenecks. That's the drowning man that we refer to, right? In my mind. And have a control point, because bottleneck just means everything's getting jammed up. Control point means here's what I want. Yeah. I want it to be here. This is controlling everything in the factory. This is dictating the rate at which I'm pulling components from everything upstream. And I know that this is going to get me my throughput target today, barring any issues at my bottleneck or my control point. And then if we want to move our control point, how do we decide where we want to move it? Because we may not know how to pick where we want our control point today. We may say we're going to elevate this, and we know it's going to move somewhere, but how do I know I don't want it to move somewhere?
I know.
Okay.
I mean, I might suggest just hire a professional that could help you. #Quantum Lean or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, why not? But that, I mean, and all kidding aside, that is a very important and complex question, is where do I want it and how do I get it there? And I would say everybody wants that answer right now. They're on the edge of their seat. I'm sure there's no 100% right answer, but I would always put the bottleneck or hashtags, or not hashtags, / the control point kind of in the middle or 3/4 of the way to the end. And generally speaking, listen, I don't want anyone hanging me out to lunch here, but generally speaking, in somewhere in your assembly area is a really good control point. So that might not be for everybody, but there's their 2 cents on, if you're not sure what this thing is or where you should put it, start there. Okay. The last step is, not letting inertia get in the way of so now you've made all these improvements, your team's pumped, you're pumped, and you think that they're just going to keep carrying on forever and ever. And that is, essentially you're getting lazy and hoping that inertia will take over, and it's not going to. You need to go back to step one and repeat that process. And you just keep going through that cycle over and over again. And your throughput should follow. Immediate
throughput gains. Why would you ever stop? Why would you ever stop looking at your bottleneck? And so in the beginning, you might be chasing hours, then you're chasing multiple minutes, then you're chasing minutes, then you're chasing seconds, then you're chasing fractions of a second. And then you're scheduling your mix a little bit better to make the changeovers easier. But you're always looking at, how can we make this better? A great example is we have people taking all this extra time trying to save on material, and their bottleneck's sitting there empty. Nothing's happening because we're so focused. We've had that drummed into our heads. Material yield is the most important thing. But when you find out that piece of material costs you $7 and that bottleneck not moving costs you $1,000 today, that's an easy decision.
Right. And we've seen that. I know the exact story.
You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. So let me ask you this, is like, how come, if it's the most important thing, why do so few focus on it?
Well, if I had that answer, I'd be sitting in Maui right now doing this podcast on the beach. It's obvious. We know this, and we all know this. I don't think we're telling anybody something they don't already know today. But humans get distracted and allow themselves to be distracted by all of the other things going on in the shop. And I just keep saying, what's more important than your bottleneck? What's more important than that control point? You spend your time there, you're going to learn a lot about the feeding operations and the subsequent operations. You're going to, well, listen, when you go on Gemba, you're going to learn a lot anyways. But where could you be today that's more important than your control point? Anything?
No, nowhere.
No, but
Nowhere.
I can tell you every shop I go into, everybody finds another place to be. They're getting a call from someone to look at this defect. They're getting a call, well, I need this material, whatever it is. There's a lot of low-level problems that are happening. And if you have the right people and roles set up in your shop that they can take care of that stuff for you, stop responding. Stop responding to everybody. That's the tail wagging the dog. Right. If I'm measured on throughput, I can tell you where I'm going to be. That's that simple. You measure me on throughput, I'm not going to be running around trying to help people find toilet paper in the office. I'm going to be stuck and I'm going to be saying no to people and making sure that I have a good system set up where we have people that can handle those kind of problems on a team leader or a line leader level. They don't have to be team leaders.
Right. I think probably another observation I've had over the years is it's just not like, maybe it's not the fun improvement, like take every person who owns a factory. Obviously we love machines. So we're like, oh, I'm going to buy the big, cool thingamajiggy. And then it's like, it's not the bottleneck, but, and we talk ourselves into, yeah, but it's going to do this. It's going to do that. It's going to do this. And this happened to me just last week. I was all excited about some new things we wanted to build. And my production manager just looked at me and goes, is that the bottleneck?
I love it.
What can I say? Nothing. Dead in the water. My whole idea, dead in the water, because he knew that I knew that he knew that I knew. And,
yep.
So that would be one reason anyway. Like, so maybe don't prioritize the more sexy improvement for the one that's actually going to make a difference.
Well, and it may not be the most sexy improvement even. It could just be something that you're really good at. Right. So you want to jump in and help someone with that because you enjoy that type of work or you're really good at it and you won't, and you can't stand the thought of someone taking 30 minutes to do something you could do in 5 minutes. But if it's not on the bottleneck, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if you're measured on bottleneck performance and throughput, where else are you going to be? I'm just going to I think that's what we don't do. If you measured me on the bottleneck, then I would just be at the bottleneck.
Right. Which kind of is a good segue into where, this is not the podcast for measurements. That's, surely that's coming, but it is critical to know that there's not one measurement that is it's not the magical measurement. There's one measurement, are you making money? But that one's such a lagging indicator that you can't use it on the shop floor. So amongst all your measurements, one of the things that we really advocate for is measure minutes per piece. And I don't care how much work it is that you think it is to get that measurement, like get that measurement, because your minutes per piece, which is all of your labor in the factory divided by how many things left the factory that day, that's going to tell you, okay, we spend 8 minutes per piece. Because if you're just doing a piece count, the bad thing will happen. You'll hire 10 people, your piece count will go up. You'll think you're doing the right thing, but you'll be losing money. You'll be like, I can't figure out what's going on. But if you monitor the piece count, because it's easy to count, as well as the minutes per piece, now you have a real gauge of the effort and energy that's going into each part.
Would you measure throughput dollars per hour, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's another podcast.
Right.
We've just advertised 3 more podcasts. I guess we got to keep going.
But they're very key. I mean, if you have a dashboard and you have all of these metrics on a dashboard, you can see how you're doing throughout at a minimum at a daily basis.
Well, I think this is a perfect spot where we could wrap this up. So let's start by saying thanks to everybody for hanging around for another episode of On the Shop Floor. We've got some exciting news, totally unexpected, but we've had nothing but ideas and questions and guest speakers It's been pouring in, so we are so excited. We're going to be bringing some really awesome stuff to all of our listeners very shortly. So I think we should get another round of applause for Lynn for joining us today. Thank you, Lynn. It was awesome to have you off of the road and in the studio, and we hope to do that a lot more. And then just for everybody who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in. This concludes episode 3 of In the Shop Floor. I lied. Episode 3 of On the Shop Floor. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go make some improvements.